So today we're going to be taking a look at some of the insane train prices in the UK. I don't think it's any secret that obviously the UK is going through a cost of living crisis, and one of the biggest issues is just travelling around. Now, while cars are seen as more of a luxury in the UK, trains and public transport are meant to be a more affordable, reliable option for people who maybe can't afford a car. Unfortunately, those trains have become extremely expensive, and TfL in London, which is, encompasses the tube, the buses, and all that good stuff, is now the most expensive public transit system in the world. Without further ado, we're going to take a look at why people say they're so expensive, some of the standards and the quality of the public transport as well. If you live in London or the UK, let me know your thoughts on the public transport, and also let me know how it compares to where you live if you have a nice public transport system by you. But without further ado, let's get into this video.
I moved out of the south because house prices there were unacceptable for what you could get, only to then sit here in an absolute state of panic trying to find a return ticket from Preston to London. And this is the choices that I get to choose between £327, £217 or £320.
How insane is that for a train ticket, by the way? Only a two-hour journey direct. One thing you need to know about UK trains is they have a direct service in many cases, and in some cases you have to change trains. It might be slightly cheaper to change, but of course it will take you a little bit longer. £327 for a two-hour train journey. Absolutely disgraceful, mate. Absolutely disgraceful. And I love how they have the little first class thing here. I don't know anyone who books the first class. The first class is literally the exact same carriage, but I think you're meant to be quiet. Who the fuck knows? But yeah, those train prices are insane. You could literally get a flight to almost anywhere in Europe for cheaper than that return.
How are you meant to improve your livelihood in this country, whereby improving it in one area means that it comes at such a huge cost in another area, be it the train prices or even energy prices? And then you get a very limited chance of finding jobs around the area that is perhaps much more affordable.
I actually experienced something similar myself to this last year when I had to move house, and it was kind of, do we move further out in London where maybe the travel links aren't so good but the rent is £200-300 cheaper a month, or do we have to firm the more expensive rent, maybe not as nice a house but get better travel links? And in the end we decided to do that option. The rent was maybe £300 more in this area, the house not probably as nice as you could get a little bit further out, but ultimately you're saving that money on travel links, right? The convenience of having much quicker travel to work or to uni or whatever it may be. That's unfortunately the situation in England at the moment, especially considering the cost of cars are so expensive as well, and it's just not worth it, and most people can't afford it. Really and truly, we are in this situation where you have to kind of compromise. You move out one place, you're going to have to deal with a different set of costs than you would maybe in London with better travel links.
And then you get a very limited chance of finding jobs around the area that is perhaps much more affordable. So how are you meant to win? How are you meant to improve and progress in life?
I mean, that's kind of just the sentiment around the UK in general. A lot of people say that the UK is a poor country attached to an extremely rich city being London. Most people try to move to London for the opportunity. It just breeds more competition and more demand for housing and on the public services and all of that, which in turn puts a lot of things up in cost. So the reality is, if you try to move out of London, your wages will probably be a lot lower. There'll be a lot less opportunity as well, because there's just no jobs in a lot of areas, and the pay is also lower. That's why so many people try to flock to London and are willing to pay all these prices for whatever it may be, because even though it's not a great option, it's a better option than the rest of the UK at the moment, unfortunately.
The pricing of UK trains is and a great example of that is right here in London, Victoria, and the journey to Gatwick Airport. So this is the Gatwick Express, and it gets you to the airport in 31 minutes, and anytime single will cost you this much. However, if you tap in and out with your contactless or Oyster card, you're going to save 10p. And
that's actually insane, by the way. Victoria to Gatwick actually said 30 minutes. So 30-minute train journey, they're trying to charge you £23. Now, obviously, if you get on a little earlier in the journey, it will be a bit cheaper. Similar things happen to Heathrow and to Stansted, Luton. Travel to airports from London is absolutely a rip-off. I have no idea why they're trying to scam so hard on these tickets. Like, it's actually insane. I know when I went to Heathrow last year, you could take the tube to Heathrow, right? Which you can't do to Gatwick. So there is that. On the way there, I took the Elizabeth line, and the Elizabeth line's meant to be the nice tube. It's got aircon, everyone loves it, you know, nice new shiny new toy. Really and truly, it's stupid expensive. It is way more expensive than the other tube lines. I think I paid, was it 11 or 12 pound last year for a one-way journey there. On the way back, I took the shitty Piccadilly line. It took a lot longer to get home. It was a lot stinkier. It was a lot hotter, but unfortunately, I'd much rather pay, I think it was £3 or whatever, to just take that rather than to pay £13 for the Elizabeth line. And obviously, if you have to take the Gatwick Express, the Stansted Express, or I don't even know what you take to get to Luton, it's going to cost you a decent amount of money. And imagine that's both ways. So you're going to be paying almost £46. Slightly cheaper than a taxi, I guess.
And in addition, if you book online direct, you're going to get 10% off the
Wow,
original
10%.
price. Now, that might not seem that complicated until I reveal that there's another option just 100 metres down here. This is a southern train to Gatwick Airport, and an anytime single is going to set you back this much. Now, at a slightly cheaper price, you may assume that this train is going to be slower. However, no, many of these trains are also 31 minutes long, and they actually come a lot more frequently at the moment than the Gatwick Express. Why does anyone book you? And it gets cheaper when you use a contactless or Oyster card. So at peak times, it's going to cost you this much, but this is where it gets wild. If it's off-peak, it's only going to cost you this much.
One thing about the UK train system is the peak and off-peak. I think it's a little stupid. You know what I mean? I think I know it's to stop demand, right? You don't want trains to be overcrowded, but unfortunately they're already overcrowded, right? The tube is an absolute clusterfuck at any point during the day a lot of the time. You go during the peak times, yes, it will be worse, but people need to get home from their job. So if you're just unlucky enough to have to travel in those times, you're just going to have to pay more. I just think it's a little bit unfair, and I don't think it actually solves the problem that people want it to solve. You know, it's one of those costs people just eat.
Which is like half the price of the original price you'd normally pay. Now, all of that
It's a lot cheaper.
Like you need a degree to understand the best option, and that's before we even factor in how all of these things can massively change the price of the same 31-minute journey. And so in the caption, I've done my best to summarise the best and cheapest ways for you to get from London Victoria to Gatwick Airport based on a range of different circumstances. But let me know in the comments.
I went to Gatwick not that long ago. From where I live, I take tram and then go to East Croydon, and then it's not as expensive from East Croydon because it's only one stop. But I feel sorry for any tourists that come here and have to use this train service, because imagine you're traveling with a family, you know, you've got a few kids, you know, there's 2-3 of you, whatever. You're going to be paying in train fares alone 60 quid. It's actually crazy. You could be paying £60 because if you're not someone who knows about London and the transport service, you're not going to know a lot of these tricks. You're just going to look at your Google Maps or whatever it is and just take the first option there, the quickest option. And that may end up scamming you out of money, because if you are with 3-4 people, you might as well just take a taxi. I think it's probably about £50 to get to Gatwick. So now we're going to shift our attention away from the train service, which we've seen how insane the prices can be on just that. We're going to look at TfL and look at the tube costs. Now, tube costs actually increased recently, a few months ago. I think it was in April of 2025, and they went up from £3 off peak journey to, I think it's £3.10, and then peak journey, I'm not 100% sure. I know it was £3.70 before. I think it's now, is it £4.10? It did increase, and that officially made London the most expensive public transport system in the world.
Guys, London has to be the biggest scam ever. I'm currently at Liverpool Street Station, and to get a train ticket from Farringdon to Liverpool Street, which is a 3-minute journey, it's going to cost you £7, which is just ludicrous. Like, how is that even allowed?
Now, obviously, this guy is using a train ticket rather than the tube. I think, is that both of those stations on the Elizabeth line? You could probably just tap your Oyster card and pay slightly less for that. But £7 on a train journey is absolutely insane. It's only 3 minutes, by the way. So it's £2, what, £2.33 a minute? Absolute disgrace, mate. Absolute disgrace. I think that is the most or the worst value for money train journey in the UK. I think I've seen a few videos on that. Just look at some of these silly things that happen with the trains in the UK. Absolutely. It's just a joke at this point, really. But now we're going to take a look at this video explaining why train prices are so high. Now, I've heard a lot of things why people always say it. You know, I googled it a few weeks ago. ChatGPT told me that a lot of it is due to train maintenance costs, track maintenance costs, right? Convenient excuse. I understand, look, it has to be very safe, it has to be well maintained. But I think a big part of this is definitely the pay that train drivers get. Now, if you live in the UK or know anything about the UK, you know that constantly there are train delays, there are train cancellations, and a lot of it is due to driver strike. Drivers on strike because they want higher pay. But you would also know in that circumstance, drivers are one of the highest paid professions in the UK, right? Train drivers, tube drivers, one of the most highest pays, one of the most sought after jobs. I think it's like 64k for a 40-hour work week or something like that. And then you obviously have a lot of overtime. So you could earn probably upwards of 80,000, maybe even more than that a year if you want to do a lot of overtime. And I think the constant striking, the constant asking for more pay, it's like a lot of tubes, by the way, are automated. You know what I mean? They just kind of press a start go button from what I understand in a lot of tubes, because the starting and stopping is automated. The closing of doors is kind of automated, right? For safety and for productivity, I guess. And there are actually some driverless trains as well, like the DLR, for example. They have someone on it. The guy isn't necessarily driving it per se. I think that's where public transport will head soon enough. But let's have a look at some of the reasons.
Why are UK trains so expensive?
We all know trains in the UK are a bit of a joke. I mean, you can literally fly to Thailand for less than the cost of an open return Manchester to London.
That's what we talked about earlier. The fact that Thailand, by the way, it's about a 12-hour flight. Very long flight. London to Manchester, I think, is what, 2-3 hours on the train. Manchester and London, probably the two biggest cities in the UK, barring Birmingham. And here we are having to pay a long haul flight price for it. Absolute disgrace.
But why are they so expensive?
Let's break it down.
One reason is that train companies have to upgrade rail infrastructure.
Like tracks and stations and stuff.
This costs a lot because we have one of the oldest railway systems in the world.
So let's talk about that, right? So, like I mentioned, people always talk about maintenance costs. Well, if they're so busy maintaining the trains and the tracks, why are they disgusting? Why are the trains so dirty, so much graffiti, so much rubbish all over it? Why can't you get them to even run on time? You know what I mean? Track maintenance, yeah? Oh, it's so old. Well, upgrade it. Upgrade it. I understand there's not a lot of profit. I understand the UK privatized rail services. I think they do get government subsidies still and stuff like that, but it's not necessarily a profitable venture. So maybe it would be a good idea for, you know, the government to maybe buy back some of the fucking train services. But yeah, let me know what you think about that in the comments though.
Railway systems in the world, the population density in the UK is high, and the demand to travel between those cities is high.
On some routes, the tickets are regulated and the prices are set.
But on other routes, train companies act like private businesses and charge whatever they want.
Well, what do you mean they act like private businesses? They are, in many cases, private businesses. And I guess they can charge what they want, because at the end of the day, the point of a business is to make money, right? But it is kind of crazy that if I have to do business between, let's say, London and Manchester, I would have to pay, what, she showed it, over £300 return. A ticket to New York is about the same cost. So what's stopping me from just taking my business overseas? Or maybe instead of trying to build a second hub in Manchester, I try and do that in New York or somewhere else where it may just be way more worth the money. You know what I mean? It's kind of crazy, really.
Train companies also need to pay their staff, which factors into the price too. Ultimately, trains in the UK are run by various businesses, and businesses need to make money.
I might just fly next time.
And there you have it. Really and truly, it comes down to they need to make money. And I think train services are one of those grey areas where, should they be a public good? Should they be like street lights where the government just runs them? Would they be more efficient? Would it cost less? Probably would cost less, although you'd probably have to make up for it in your taxes, right? But kind of a sticky one, really. You guys let me know what you think the big issue with the trains are. But now we're going to look at some of the conditions on the trains, right? First clip we're going to look at here is a guy getting a fine. Now, for any of you who have traveled on TfL before, you know there's ticket inspectors roaming around. You never know what tube or what train, tram, bus they're going to be on. But if you have an invalid ticket, they are going to write you a fine that you need to pay. And a lot of the time, it is way more than the cost of the journey. So if you have a train ticket that was £15, they might write you a £50 fine, £100 fine. A lot of the time, it is extremely expensive. And I get it's to deter people. If you go to any tube station in the UK, you'll see a bunch of people running through the barriers and them not giving a fuck. So really and truly, where's the balance? But yeah, let's have a look at some of these clips.
Do ticket inspectors just enjoy ruining people's day? Because my
Probably.
rail card was out of date by one day.
I have to say, ticket inspectors, parking ticket people have got to be some of the most hated professions on the planet. Like, no one wants a parking ticket, no one wants a fine, and I feel like you have to be a bit of a bitter person to do it. I understand a lot of people need the money, but I've only had one instance where I was pulled aside because of my Oyster card. I was still a kid, my Oyster card got wet and the face rubbed off. It was still mine, I had my name on it, whatever. The guy literally decided to write me a ticket and make me miss 2 stops, get off 2 stops after my stop because he was so slow. And you know, I was a kid, like, you could let me off, you could just say you need to order a new Oyster, right? But then he confiscated my Oyster and gave me some temporary paper bullshit. Just like,
One day and now I have to pay a £62 fine.
That is crazy.
£69.90. Are you actually for real?
and like I said before, the fines are insane. This guy's rail card out of date one day. He may have forgot about it. You know, we all forget about subscriptions. Sometimes we all forget about paying it one day. I understand you have to enforce the rules, but you could have just said, can you renew it right now or can you renew it tonight? Absolutely insane.
I'm actually aware this is like my fault, by the way, but come on. One day I'm fucking sense of humour.
No, because tell me why he kept asking me, like, how tall are you, where do you live, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, do you want to hook up, or are you giving me a ticket? If you see something that doesn't look right, do you hear that in the background? Yeah, I see something that doesn't look right, and it's this.
Guys, the power trip.
That's actually insane. I understand, look, it is his fault at the end of the day. If he had kept his eye on it, it would have been there. But that point of the guy trying to make small talk with him is so awkward because it obviously takes some time to do. I've had a similar situation when I went to Heathrow Airport and the guy had to search me. He had to pat me down for some reason. I can't remember exactly why. And the guy is here patting me down and trying to make small talk. I'm like, brother, just do your job. I don't want to talk to you. You're invading my personal space right now. And you're trying to ask me where I'm going, how long. I don't want to answer those questions, bro.
It's crazy. I'm like, what did you get from that experience? Like, are you on commission? Because if you're actually on commission,
I wouldn't be surprised.
You might as well have someone at the border who spits in your face and asks you for 100 quid, because that's how it feels coming back into the UK. Like, the most painful thing about this ordeal was when I was on the plane, I thought, I'm going to get myself an Uber, but it was 60 quid.
Yeah, it's expensive.
So I paid £12.50 for the train, plus a £60 fine. So actually it would have been cheaper and easier for me to get an Uber home.
That is a situation. We did see earlier how expensive it can be from Gatwick, but if you're coming home in the middle of the day, it's best not to get an Uber. When I came home from my last holiday, we got to the airport about 12 a.m. or just after. So there was no option to take a train home. We had to eat the £60 Uber. So yeah, unfortunately, that's kind of how it is. I do understand some of these people. They do kind of pick and choose who they go after at times as well. It can be a bit frustrating. So the last video I want to take a look at here is the absolute disgusting nature of the tube these days. Now, if you've been on the tube recently, especially the Central line and the Bakerloo line for sure, there is so much graffiti all over it. Like, it's literally crazy, destroying the tube, really just making it extremely ugly. I mean, you're paying your hard-earned money to travel on this thing every day, and people are just ruining it or just making it even worse than it needs to be, because we know how dirty it is already. But let's just have a look at some of the graffiti on the tube at the moment.
London Underground passengers the increase in graffiti being seen across trains. Transport for London has admitted there has been a significant increase in graffiti on tube trains in recent months. One passenger described the tags as...
I mean, look at this. I mean, I noticed this when I've been traveling recently. It's just like, why? Why are people doing this? Where's the respect for the country? Where's the respect for the transport? And I think that's one big problem in the UK right now. People do not like the country. People have no respect for the country. You walk around, there's dog shit on the street. People just piss and shit all over the street. There's rubbish all over the street. I think that's one thing we need to tackle in this country for sure.
Vile, claiming they wanted those responsible to clean it up themselves. Labour's Bassam Fuzz.
Good luck, buddy. Good luck, finding those people. TFO is so funny. They want people to clean this up themselves. They can't even stop people bumping fares, bro. They can't even stop people bumping fares, and they want to make these people clean it up. My ass, mate.
Assembly member told My London that the acts of vandalism were an affront to passengers' eyes. Transport for London has said a track defect in its depot resulted in the automatic train wash being out of service for several weeks, meaning trains had to be cleaned by hand. It added that the defect had been rectified and the train wash was now being used as normal, with the...
But does the train wash only clean the outside of the train? Is that what they're saying? That people had to clean the outside? Brother, the outside is disgusting anyway. You touch it, your hand's gonna go black. I remember I was trying to force my way on once, and literally I had to like touch the door to squeeze in, and my hand was just black. Like, the trains are dirty, they're disgusting. Even the inside is disgusting. It's just probably laziness. They don't want to spend the money to clean it. That's probably what the real issue is.
condition of the fleet beginning to improve as a result.
I don't think the graffiti will be cleaned up anytime soon, and when it does, people will just re-tag it. Another issue is just these same people are forcing their way onto tubes anyway. There's a lot of... We talked about ticket inspectors earlier, right? But when it comes to the tube in particular, obviously there's the barriers you have to tap in. People just constantly force their way through, regardless if there's a ticket inspector there or not, or like someone there. Unless there's police, I guess, people will just keep doing it. They'll just force their way through the barriers because no one's going to stop them. They're not going to be chased after. You're not going to be blacklisted, right? No one's going to stop you next time you go in. You're just going to keep forcing your way through and not paying, right? And no one's going to do anything about it, right? And it just kind of affects everyone else when people do that. But yeah, that's the state of UK public transport and UK trains currently. You guys let me know what you think in the comments below. Compare it to where you live. Let me know how it compares. That is all I got for you today. I'll see you all in the next one.